from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast Network. I'm Reverend Charles Harrison, and on this episode, we're going to talk about what is the hot topic of the city right now, and that is who is going to be the next police chief of the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. Stay tuned and listen to this episode today. Hello, this is Reverend Charles Harrison, and Happy New Year to you. I am back on the air after several weeks of being off, and last week I was not able to do the podcast because I was sick. Somehow there was a bug around the household, and eventually Daddy got it and the husband got it, but it is so good to be back on the podcast and to start the new year off right. I have a special guest with me today as we talk about a hot topic in the city right now, and that is who's going to be the next police chief of the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. And the question that I really have is it going to make a difference who that chief is in the city? The city of Indianapolis is on a 9-year, listen to this, 9-year surge in violence. Since 2015, the city of Indianapolis has seen the highest level of violence in the history of the city. It started out the last year of Mayor Ballard when the city broke a homicide record in 2015, and then it continued under the current mayor, Mayor Hogsett, where Mayor Hogsett went 8 consecutive years where we have seen the highest level of violence in the history of the city. Here we are 9 years later, trying to figure out how do we get control of the violence in the city of Indianapolis. We have been in a public safety crisis that long. And here's the other tidbit with that. I believe, and one of the things I warned about in 2015 was that if we didn't get control of the violence in Indianapolis, that it was going to spread to cities around Indianapolis and really in central Indiana. And we have seen that. We have seen, and even today, we had 2 people killed in Avon. We've had violence in Fishers and Cumberland and Plainfield, and you just name it, Greenwood, south of us, and then we've seen a lot in Anderson and Muncie, and all of it's interconnected to really what I consider the spreading of the violence out of Indianapolis into other cities around the metropolitan Indianapolis area, what we would call that, even into places like Muncie and Anderson. So I want to get into that discussion today. Does it really matter who the police chief is? And with me today is John Hall, who is the former Deputy Mayor of Indianapolis under former Mayor Stephen Goldsmith. Matter of fact, I got started in this work with 10 Point under Mayor Goldsmith. That's when 10 Point was formed officially in 1999. So it was the Goldsmith administration that talked me into this. Amen. So I don't know if to blame them or not. I wasn't expected to still be doing this 25 years later, but here I am. Welcome, John, to the show today.
Good morning. Good morning.
Listen, let's have this conversation because there are really a lot of names that I'm hearing really about who will be the next police chief. And certainly I'm very opinionated about who I think it should be. I really believe there are several qualities I think the police chief needs to have. One is I would like to see someone who has some kind of track record as a deputy chief or in some other capacity within IMPD that has worked in the area of crime and violence reduction, because I really think that is key. Have they done it as a deputy deputy chief, as a district commander, or in some other capacity within IMPD, where they have worked with the community in helping to reduce violence. Because I think it's going to be important, whoever it is that they have to have some kind of track record where they have had some kind of success, in my opinion, in working in collaborative partnerships with community stakeholders to help reduce the level of violence. Because I do not think that whoever the chief is, that IMPD by themselves can reduce the level of violence. I think this is a critical time in the history of the city. We have had 4 consecutive years of 200 plus homicides. Is 200 plus homicides now the new norm for Indianapolis when it comes to homicides each year? If that is, that's kind of very alarming to me when we can go back 11 years ago when the city was under 100 criminal homicides or murders, and we were under 120 total homicides, and we did that from about 2000 to 2012. I believe that's where the city should be, or lower. I believe that's where the city should be. I'm not for sure, though, John, I would say whether the police chief, by him or herself, is going to make a whole lot of difference if they're not allowed to be the chief. And part of my concern is maybe, if the mayor is going to be the public safety director, which it seems like that's what has happened on the 25th floor, I don't know if that ties the hand of the police chief to be able to do what is necessary to try to bring the level of violence down and not be concerned about the politics of it.
I think that's an excellent point, Pastor, that the mayor, I'm certain, has his ideas of how he wants to combat this crime crisis that we're having here in Indianapolis. Now, I think I read an article this week that homicides in many major cities went way down, even Detroit. And I thought that was interesting. But I would agree with your point that whoever is going to be selected probably should come inside of IMPD.
So you support someone from within rather than bringing someone from outside the department?
I believe I do.
Okay.
Now, 20 years ago, I might have been different.
All right.
I might have said, well, we need somebody new.
Okay.
Not beholden to anybody.
Right.
To come in and bring their expertise.
Right.
To do the work. But I would say that here in Indianapolis, there are commanders, officers that are as experienced in fighting crime that, given the opportunity, could make a difference. The piece that I see that's critical, though, is this individual not only has to know how to fight crime,
right,
but he's got to be able to coordinate with all of the community interests, the crime-fighting foundations and grants. It's got to be a coordinated system working here. You know, you point out it's not going to be just the police lowering these numbers.
Right.
Totally agree. But someone has to be able to coordinate and work with all the pots that are concerned about reducing crime, whether it's funders, whether it's nonprofits, whether it's community groups, that's a huge job.
Would you say that under the Goldsmith administration, that was facilitated by the Front Porch Alliance? It seemed like to me that 10 Point's relationship with the city was really centered around our relationship with the Front Porch Alliance. And they tended to help coordinate in my opinion, and then I can talk about the ballot administration, our efforts on the ground that, helped to reduce the level of violence. I think they were the facilitators of bringing the courts together, probation, the prosecutor's office, and law enforcement, all of us around the table together to coordinate our efforts along with other grassroots organizations. I saw in the Goldsmith administration, that was kind of the facilitator of helping to coordinate what I thought at that time was a citywide effort in the urban core.
Yeah. That Bill and Isaac did an extraordinary job of working with Chief Toller,
right,
and making these pieces click. Now that was a different time. Although in '98 we had the highest homicide numbers ever,
right,
here in Indianapolis,
right,
and so it's all relative. But that's what I think. This new chief coming in ought to communicate with the mayor and the council that this coordination needs to be a critical part in fighting crime in Indianapolis.
I think that some will argue that it is in place. I just don't think that it is coordinated and embraces all of the groups in the city.
Yeah.
I think I just don't see that. And I'm not sure we have done an effective job of evaluating as a city whether or not it works, and I think every year we have to evaluate that, and maybe that becomes the job of the new police chief in helping to evaluate based on the data whether or not we are being effective in traditional hotspot areas. Because in 1999, after a record-breaking year in 98, we focused on the areas of the city that was driving the violence in 1998 that led to the city breaking that criminal homicide record that year. And there was a dramatic decline in 1999, right, based on concentrating on those areas of the city where we were having the highest level of criminal homicides, and making sure in those areas we had best practices, based on what we were aware of that was working in other cities across the country, and particularly Boston at that time. Basically we took the Boston model, right, and brought it to Indianapolis, and based on that, we were able to, bring significantly down those criminal homicide numbers.
That is critical. I think I heard the mayor talk about bringing in an evaluation component to look at the practices that have been going on. And so I think that's one good thing that I've heard, that we'll take a look. I think you read on top of this piece. Take a look at what's worked, what's not worked, what are best practices in these other cities that are similar to us. How are they able to drive down homicide numbers and really make a solid effort to go after lowering those numbers here? Right
now, Chris Bailey has been appointed as the interim police chief. I am high on Bailey. I'm high on Chief Bailey. I had a chance to work with Chief Bailey in the Butler-Tarkington neighborhood and Crown Hill neighborhood and Highland vicinity after the gang war had erupted in Butler-Tarkington in the fall of 2015. I just thought he did an amazing job of working with the neighborhood association and with faith-based groups and helping to coordinate a neighborhood initiative. Two neighborhoods, because I think Butler, Tarkington, and Crown Hill were both engaged in trying to push out of those neighborhoods, the drug trafficking, and directly deal with the gang violence that had led to 5 individuals being killed within less than 2 months, so that was shocking. Mm-hmm. And I think he did a fabulous job of working with community. A lot of the meetings we had and bringing together a community and the other law enforcement partners in helping us to get control of the violence in both Butler, Tarkington, and Crown Hill. I think those 2 neighborhoods in 2015 combined for 14 homicides. In 2026, a year later, they only had 1 homicide in those 2 neighborhoods. Okay. Yeah. And then we went down into Highland vicinity, which has seen 7 consecutive years since 2016 where they have had no homicides in those areas. So those are 3 neighborhoods really back to back. And I think it needs to be someone like him, if not him. I'm sorry to hear that, he withdrew his name from being a candidate. But I certainly think someone like Chris Bailey would be the ideal person. I think there's a couple other people too. I think within IMPD, I don't think Deputy Chief Kendall Adams has the experience on the district level, but he has been involved in so much within IMPD, and now he's over investigations, and I think he's doing a good job there. But certainly he knows the community and is well connected, with the community. And I think he would do a good job of working with the community, to work to come up with a plan to address the violence in these different parts of the city.
Always like Kendall, he
yes
was around when we were with Goldsmith and has performed. I hope he's really serious about wanting the job if he does. What about Commander Lewis? Did he put his name in the pot?
I have not heard Commander Lewis's name, but certainly
he's a good one.
Certainly, yes. Certainly, Commander Lewis is one of my favorites because I work with him now in the Northwest District, and I think he's done an excellent job as the commander of the Northwest District. Works well with the community. Works well.
Yes.
And community leaders like myself love district commanders where you can pick up the phone, you can call them. They're always available. And they're open to suggestions. They also call us when they need us, and I think Commander Lewis would be another person. I haven't heard his name, but certainly on Real Talk, we're throwing his name out there too to someone that I think should be considered.
Excellent. If the city doesn't wrap its arms around crime in the city, the whole total investment of tourism, athletics, it'll weaken our position. And so I'm looking forward to...
Well, do you think it has been weakened? Do you think the last 10 years has weakened the city?
Well, yeah. In terms of our image,
in
terms of our national image, I mean, I think we still have a good reputation. But when you're getting ready to sign up to go for your convention and you pick 3 or 4 cities, and if you're reading about 200 homicides, you're reading about shootings downtown, that's not a place you're going to want to go to. So the more we can address this, the better off I think the city of Indianapolis can be. The mayor's talking about great investments in the mall, changing its look, bringing in some hotels that can increase the capacity of visitors and tourism. All of that's good stuff, but we've got to touch that crime piece to where it's not on the front page every week.
Well, one of my frustrations is that City Hall sometimes doesn't want to listen to community groups as we have made recommendations, and sometimes the business community downtown in addressing, a problem that, I first encountered in probably 1999 when 10 Point first was formed, and we were having problems downtown with the kids at the mall, And John, that was bound to, at some point, be the demise, in my opinion, of the Circle Center Mall. It was going to happen, and it was because people were afraid to do what I felt was necessary in order to nip that in the bud a long time ago.
Yeah. That I believe the future can be bright, and the leadership is there, and let's hope for the best.
So when it comes to the police chief, I'm going to say this: I would hope that the situation with interim Chief Bailey, I would hope that would change a little bit. That whatever the reason is, he's decided to withdraw his name, that would be reconsidered. Because I think there needs to be continuity. Good point.
I like Taylor. Taylor's a good dude.
Yeah, Taylor was a good dude. Yeah,
I think they beat him up too bad. I think he's a good dude, and I think he was sincere in trying to do the job.
Yeah, but it comes with the territory, and I just wish that some of that you got to not pay attention to. But I know it's hard for them not to do that because there's going to be somebody or some group that's always going to be critical.
Yeah.
Let
me ask you something.
Okay.
Do you need a chief that is hardcore, that, no nonsense, smack them upside the head? Is that?
Well, you don't want to ask me that question. Yeah. Because I think I think you got to have a chief that's going to be very visible. A lot of times on social media, I'll look at what's happening across the country, and in a lot of these cities, particularly when there's a black chief, they tend to be at the scene of a lot of these shootings and homicides, making a statement. I think that is needed. I think messaging is so important when it comes to battling this issue of urban violence, because I think there are several audiences that you have to speak to. You got to speak to Junebug them and send a message to Junebug them what's going to be acceptable and unacceptable, and what the police are not going to tolerate. You also have to speak to the public who may be concerned and fearful.
Yeah.
And I think the police chief can help convey the right kind of message. I used to tell Chief Height sometimes that, Chief, you have to sometimes talk crazy to us. He would always start laughing. And I said, one of the successes I think we had when Ballard was the mayor, and the reason we had 4 consecutive years under 100 murders and under 116 homicides in each of those 4 years, was because we had a deputy chief who became the face of public safety in Indianapolis, and Bill Benjamin, who would talk crazy to the public, and he was no nonsense, and there was fear in the hood when it came to how people perceived Bill Benjamin. They knew that if you did something, he was coming to get you.
That's a strong message.
Yeah, it was a strong message. Now Sheriff Anderson got in trouble one time when we had the quadruple homicide of the 2 mothers and their 2 children.
Over on the west side?
It was on the east side. Remember, on the east side. On the east side. And I was at that press conference and spoke, and Sheriff Anderson said to the individuals, "We're going to hunt you down like dogs." Well, that became controversial, but that's what happened.
Okay.
That's what happened. And for some in the community, we applauded that because I think within 72 hours, we made arrest. I think, and this is the difference, I think you need someone who is going to be that forceful. I do. if it's not going to be the police chief, it needed to be the public safety director. And that's one of the things I probably disagree with this administration, but certainly they have a right to do what they want to do. I think you need a public safety director and a police chief. I do. You need someone who's focusing 24 hours a day on helping to address the issue of public safety. And I don't believe all of that can fall alone on the police chief. That's why I think a public safety director would be the ideal person to coordinate a more broader citywide effort.
Does the fact now that you can carry a gun in Indianapolis change the paradigm on homicides? I mean, when you started the 10-point coalition, that wasn't the case.
Right.
Does this make it different now here in this city?
Well, the numbers since the law was passed have not increased, but have decreased. So it becomes harder to make the argument. You know, in 2020, the city broke a homicide record and eclipsed 200 homicides. In 2021, we then reached 271 homicides. Since then, the numbers have gone down in both 2022 and 2023. So I'm not for sure, John, there's evidence that the new law, state law, which allows people to carry guns without permits, has impacted the violence in a negative way in the city.
Okay.
I don't think the numbers show that. Now, law enforcement would, I think, what's concerning to residents, though, is the fact that they're openly carrying these guns, and you see them more frequently than what you used to. And I think that makes people uneasy, but I'm not for sure it has led to any more violence than what we've seen in 2020 and 2021 before that law was passed.
Interesting. That's my thoughts were this new chief, whoever it is, will have to operate in a atmosphere of everybody's got a gun.
I think the biggest concern, I would say, back then and now, is fixing the broken judicial system. I think, and maybe that's one of the things the police chief can do is be an advocate for addressing catch and release, the revolving door, because I think it's difficult if law enforcement arrests repeat violent offenders and they're right back out on the street committing another violent crime.
That's right.
And I think that's really been the issue, in my opinion, that has really driven the violence in Indianapolis over the last 9 years, is this kind of revolving door. We are arresting individuals who have a propensity for violence, and then they're right back out on the streets committing more violence. And I think it's harder to get people to come forward and to be witnesses, you know, and it's harder to keep the violence down in certain parts of the city when the same people who are the instigators of it are out there committing violent crimes.
Yeah, typically these individuals, they're not being released back to Carmel and Fisher.
No.
They're released back to my neighbors next door.
Well, and Carmel and Fishers, you know, and Avon and Brownsburg and Greenwood, they're not going to allow that. So while they're being released back into urban areas, and that is, you know, and I think whoever the police chief is, that is an issue that they have to be willing to help address. I don't know if their hands are going to be tied by the mayor's office, but it is a component that is leading to the record level of violence that we're seeing in Indianapolis.
Interesting piece.
Yeah, well, it is. It's an interesting piece and one that I think has to be addressed. And that would be something I hope the new police chief is willing to address. If not, 2024 is going to be another 200 plus homicide month, and it's not starting out good. You know, what we're in the first 12 12 days of 2024, and we've already had 8 homicides. So 8 homicides in the first 12 days. We're on pace again for another 200 plus year in homicides.
Do you think we're using all the technology that's out there here in Indianapolis to fight crime? License plate readers, cameras.
I do think, John, that we are. I think we're deploying more of that around the city, particularly in areas where we're seeing a lot more violence. So I think technology is something that law enforcement is using more and more, to help them, identify the most violent people and get them off the streets. I think the other thing that they're doing now is using, the feds to help, the U.S. Attorney's Office, to prosecute some of these gun crimes, because the penalty is going to be much more stiffer, and it helps get people off the street and them not being arrested, and they're right back out on the street within 48 to 72 hours.
So whoever this chief is going to be, he or she,
right?
They need to have that federal, state, local connections so that they can work all the little levers.
Right.
To decrease crime.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now, they're working on a regional level when it comes to Central Indiana, because I think you have to now include Central Indiana.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that individuals in Indianapolis have spread out into other cities across Central Indiana, and they're operating. So individuals, groups have expanded. And that's why I think there ought to be some concern about the potential for violence in some of these other cities that are not used to having violence. And I think the new police chief of Indianapolis is going to play a vital role in creating somewhat of a regional approach to this. And I do think, John, they have that in place.
Okay.
But certainly whoever the new chief is going to play a vital role in continuing that kind of effort.
Very good.
Yeah. So I do think. So I'm looking forward to this. I'm hoping that Chief Bailey is going to be given some time to try to put some things in place before the selection of a new chief to ride the ship and get the city back on the right track. We're not starting out good. And we need to get this back on the right track. And I'm hoping that they will empower the new chief to start doing some initiatives, not just with law enforcement, but with also community groups.
That's critical.
See, it is critical, because I do think we know what works. I do think we know what works, John. How can we implement that citywide? And again, I'm going to make the argument, and Chief Bailey knows this. What was done in Butler-Tarkington by the Butler-Tarkington Neighborhood Association needs to be replicated citywide. I think that's the model that neighborhoods should use, that kind of collaborative partnership with faith-based grassroots organization and law enforcement and the business community working together to fight crime.
Makes sense.
It makes sense. And really that's what the Goldsmith administration did, in 1999. That's how we brought those numbers down so quickly.
Made an effort. Made a good effort.
Yeah, it was a good effort. It's good effort. Well, John, thank you so much for joining me today on Real Talk to start out the new year.
Amen.
This is Reverend Harrison, and this has been Real Talk. Join me next time as I bring you more Real Talk about the real issues that affect our community here in Indianapolis and across the country. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast and share it on Facebook and Twitter. This is Reverend Harrison. I hope that you have a blessed and an awesome day. And for me, this is the first time I get a chance to wish you a happy new year and hope that you have a blessed and awesome year.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.